good morning if you're here, good evening, or whatever else in between, wherever you are. It's wonderful to see you all again. So today we have Hannah Kaplan and Mark Arnold here from the Center of International Experience to talk to us about UHIP, which is a university health insurance plan, and your study permits. So both of those are obviously very important to you as new college international students. And first and foremost, I'm happy to pass on to Hannah Kaplan, who will be talking to us about our university health insurance plan. Hello, Hannah.
Good morning. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for having us. So just give me a second. I'm going to open up my presentation. Okay. So thank you everyone for being here no matter what time of day it is. As mentioned, my name is Hannah and I work at the Center for International Experience. And even before we start, we have this beautiful photo in the background. Just wanted to show you where the Center for International Experience is. Even if you might not be coming right away, we do hope that eventually we will see you in person. So we're located across from the bookstore. And right now we are located, the best way to find out more information about the CIE is uoft.me/CIE. That's a shortcut to our website that you'll get all sorts of information. So we just wanted to start with that. Now, talking about UHIP, the University of Toronto has different health supports for you as a student. And today we're going to focus more on the first one that I have in bold, the University Health Insurance Plan. You can find more information about those on those two websites mentioned there. One of them is a U of T website and the other one is from the actual insurance company. But I'm also briefly going to mention a bit about supplemental plans and this other program called MySSP. So supplemental plan is a plan that you have in addition to UHIP, and sometimes students get confused. They're not sure what is covered in which plan. So I'm not going to go into too much depth, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what is covered in each plan so that you have a better understanding. MySSP is a really valuable support that we have for all students at U of T, which is sort of an app that you can do chat or phone to get support with someone. If you're feeling stressed or sad, or even sometimes you just don't know exactly how you're feeling and you want to talk to somebody, that is available 24/7. So it doesn't matter the time zone where you are, and it's available from any country wherever you are. So we'd highly recommend you check that out. There's information on the website uoft.me/myssp for you to just sort of see how it works. So more in details about UHIP. It's a mandatory plan for all international students. So you already have it when you pay your tuition. It's very broad insurance that is sort of similar to the insurance that other people who are domestic students would have. So you have up to $1 million policy insurance per year, and all hospital services, your doctor's services, really the core basics are there. There's a lot in it, so you can look and find out more about the plan details, what is covered, what is not covered on the UHIP website to sort of see, but it's a very broad, extensive plan that is very similar to the plan that domestic students would have. A little bit different. So this plan is not offered. Supplemental plans are often offered by your student union. So as an undergraduate student, this would be covered by UTSU. That's your undergraduate student union. And this is sort of like extra, the top up after the basics that you have hospital and emergency. There's some other things that might not be covered, so they're covered by your supplemental plan. So some of the things that are covered, for example, could be dental to get your teeth cleaned, vision to if you need glasses or get your eyes checked, and most importantly, prescription drugs. So that maybe is, it's strange. Why is it not in the other plan? Prescription drugs are part of my health, but that's just how it is in Ontario right now, that your prescription drugs would be covered by this supplemental plan. And so because it's not part of UHIP, the information and the details are on a different website. So I've given the link there, it's Student Care, where you can then say, I'm a U of T student and I'm an undergrad student full-time, and then it will give you details about your specific supplemental plan. And by the way, I didn't mention, but we'll have a short period for questions before Mark's part. So we're holding the questions to the end, but please, if you have any questions, keep them in mind to ask me. So a bit about how UHIP works. It is an annual plan. So every time, if you're still going to be a U of T student and you pay your tuition, then you're covered for the year. And it's actually from September 1st to August 31st. So when you're back in your second year, you would need again to sort of print up a new card because it's a new coverage period. This year we have a little bit of a change. We're offering early coverage that actually already started as of August 10th. And that's for students who might have needed to arrive early to do the quarantine period. So it's free of charge. It's been added on just to make sure that if anybody arrived early, that they would have health insurance. And just another thing, students might be relating to COVID, if I had any COVID tests or things needed, would it be covered? It would be covered by the UHIP insurance plan. So one thing, the steps that students would do when they're actually here in Toronto, they would register, and we have explanations of how the registration works on our own website. So the link is there. The task is get your UHIP card for international students. And you really want to print your card and carry it with you when you're in Toronto in case you have to go to see a doctor, to a hospital. You already have it all set up, so then you don't have to make any payments when you go to the hospital or to see the doctor. Okay, so speaking of which, if you're not feeling well and you want to see a doctor or go to a hospital, I would recommend as a first stop and to get familiar with our Health and Wellness Center, which is located on campus, actually right across from the Center for International Experience. You can make an appointment, but they also have some drop-in times that, depending if you get there early in the morning, they can take you on the same day, or you can book an appointment in advance. There's other things that are known as walk-in clinics, meaning that you don't need an appointment. And there are various walk-in clinics located close to campus. And this is especially good for you to look into and to know in case the Health and Wellness Center, the U of T one, is closed. For example, it would be closed on the weekends or in the evening. So you might want to know where the other walk-in clinics are located. So you can get all that information from our Health and Wellness Center. And one thing to know too is that U of T is located close to a lot of top-notch hospitals, all the best hospitals. A lot of them are walking distance, and so they're very close, which is great news. You don't want to go there just to ask, oh, can I see a doctor? I have a sore throat and I want to check that. The hospitals, if you have walk-ins, they have an emergency center if needed. And if you have an emergency, of course, you can call 911 is the number to call here for emergencies. But most of the hospitals, it wouldn't just be a walk-in clinic that you won't be able to find to see a doctor right away. How would you find a doctor or a clinic? It's also important to know who accepts the UHIP insurance. So there, before you just choose any doctor, you can find a list of preferred, through the preferred provider network. You can find a clinic or a hospital or a doctor that's near you where they're going to accept UHIP on the spot, which just makes it easier for you because they do direct billing, which means that you won't have to bring a claim form or then pay yourself and then get refunded from the insurance company. So if you go to a place that accepts UHIP and does direct billing, it's much more convenient for you. Another thing to look into, if you're going to be paying out of your pocket and then doing a claim form and getting the insurance company to pay you back, you want to see if the cost of the doctor is the cost that the insurance company will pay you back. There might be a slight difference if the doctor is charging you more and the insurance company says, normally we only pay doctors $100 for that, but the doctor that you chose is charging you $200. So you can also sort of get that information if you're going to a doctor that doesn't have direct billing. So of course, this year is a little bit different for a lot of you starting at U of T because of the travel restrictions. So some of your questions might relate to the fact that you might not be in Toronto right now. So we want you to know that if you're studying remotely for the full fall term, there will be disenrollment that you would be able to do in October if you're not going to actually be here for the fall term, because the UHIP insurance can actually, it's for being when you're in Ontario. So if you're not in Ontario and you're not using it for the fall term, then you can disenroll. Another important thing to note is if you do return or not return, if you come, let's say then in November, you're like, hey, actually I can come now, I'm going to come for November, you would be required to re-enroll, because it's mandatory for all international students to have this insurance when they're here, because we want to make sure that you're covered, and if something happens to you, that you have health insurance. So another situation that you might be in, perhaps you were studying, you went to high school in BC and you're planning on coming to Toronto, but you're just going to stay in BC and do your courses from there. Then we would ask you to get in touch with our UHIP office to see what the next steps are in terms of coverage or enrollment, disenrollment. So I said, if you need to get in touch with their UHIP office, they are there for you. They have virtual drop-in times and appointments, so you can definitely connect and ask your questions. And you can also email them or call. I think the phones might be a recording that goes to the email, but the office is still fully up and functioning and there to support you. So please don't be shy to get in touch with us if you have any questions, but also check out more information on the website and read through the details of the plan. And you can find all the information, the shortcut uoft.me/UHIP. So thanks for your attention. I do have 5 short minutes to take some questions before passing it over to my colleague, Mark. But here we go. Will we automatically be notified about disenrollment? And can we do it for the entire year? So excellent question. Right now, the UHIP office is focusing on the fall term. And as the time progresses, we'll have more information about how the winter term will work. So for now, the information about disenrollment is that it will be available in October. I'm not sure if you're going to get like a notification of disenrollment is now open. So I would recommend checking the UHIP website in October so that you can see if there's a form to fill from the UHIP website. So I would just recommend checking back, and maybe your kind colleagues like Tyler would actually send out like an email to you through the new college students being, hey, the UHIP disenrollment is now available for the students who are going to complete their full fall term back home. So it might not come directly from the UHIP office, but I'm sure you'll hear about it. But now that you know about it because you've attended orientation, yes, you can also know to check yourself in October. Good question. Okay, here's another one. Is the supplemental plan a separate plan from UHIP, as in we have to pay for it along with UHIP? That's an excellent question as well. Yes, so the fees from that you're paying to cover UHIP are part of your tuition. So when you pay international student tuition, there is a line specifically for UHIP. And so you would disenroll from that if you're not going to be in Toronto for the fall term. The supplemental plan that is offered by your undergraduate student union is a separate plan, and it does have a separate fee as well. So it will be on another line. If you're looking at your fees, if you check the line by line, it is from the undergraduate student union, and they often have an opt-out period. So they have a time up until a certain date that you can say, I don't need this plan. In the past, you had to say, I have another plan that covers my dentist, so I don't need your dentist plan. I have to say that I haven't seen any updated information on how their opt-out period is going to work this year. But you could check the UTSU website. I think hopefully they might have information soon, or also if I find out anything, I can pass it on to Tyler and Tyler can share it as well. But the CIE doesn't administer the supplemental plan. So we don't necessarily have all the most up-to-date information because it's administered by the undergraduate student union. That's an excellent question. Okay, we have 1 minute left, 2 minutes left before passing it on. But these are great questions. Maybe we can take one more, if anybody else has one more to put in the chat. No, I think that's it. So I think we can pass it on to Mark Arnold, who's going to talk more about understanding your study permit or in immigration type things. So and I'll be back here at the end if there's more questions.
Great, thank you very much, Hannah. It's nice to be in the same virtual room as everyone. I do wish that we could be in a physical room all here in Toronto, but I know that day will come at some point. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks very much to Tyler for inviting me and for inviting Hannah as well. Thank you, Hannah, for all that really important information about the health insurance plan. I know that can be quite unfamiliar to international students, but it is there for international students. So I'm really glad that, that Hannah could share that information with you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to share my screen, and I also have a PowerPoint presentation with some slides. Hopefully you all can see that now. This is my title page. So of course here we are, new college orientation for 2020. And this is a presentation specifically for international students to help them understand about their study permit. So my name is Mark Arnold, as Tyler and Hannah mentioned. My job is International Student Immigration Advisor. And here in Canada, that's a particular profession. So we have to take special training and take a special exam to receive a license to be able to do that sort of work. My office is the Center for International Experience, so the same place where Hannah works. I hope you'll get to know that center and all of the different kinds of support services that we offer. So for this presentation, I know we're being recorded and we have about 30 people here in the audience live. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that from time to time, these rules and regulations can change. In particular, this summer, we've seen some of the rules and regulations have changed maybe on about a monthly basis. So it's important for me just to include this disclaimer at the beginning of the presentation, which is basically just to say that all of the information here is valid as of yesterday, August 21st. That's the last time that I was spending my focus and my concentration on the actual rules. So I was looking at the Canadian government website and the laws that are in place governing all of these matters. That's the most recent time that I was looking was yesterday. So if you're viewing this presentation maybe in late September or October, just be aware that the rules may have changed since then, since late August. Always the best place for students to go to get the most up-to-date information is the Government of Canada website. Most of the URLs, the web addresses for the Government of Canada website, will start with canada.ca, and you can see an example there on the screen. This is the website address that will take you directly to the part of the Canadian government which handles these matters. It's called Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. We usually refer to it as IRCC, the acronym IRCC for short. Okay, so what am I going to present? This is what I'm going to cover in the presentation. First of all, I'm just going to give you a brief overview about the work that I do. I'm part of a team of advisors who provide immigration advice. So I'm going to give you an overview of how we do that. Just very quick, so you know how to get in touch with us, basically, how to access our information. Next, I'm going to talk about the impact of the COVID pandemic on processing of study permit applications this summer. I know that many of you are still outside of Canada. Probably quite a few of you, may not even have your study permit approval yet. So I want to just address that. I will also give a brief overview of the current travel restrictions and exemptions for people who are thinking about traveling to Canada. So we need for that to be very clear to students, because many students are not yet permitted to come to Canada. So I want to be very clear about that. The next part of the presentation is for students who are here in Canada and have arrived and they do have a study permit. So I'm going to briefly review what are your responsibilities as a study permit holder when you're here in Canada. And then finally, I'll finish off with just some additional advice for international students to help them get settled and manage their responsibilities as an international student with a study permit. Okay, so here we go. First of all, let's talk about immigration advising at the Center for International Experience. As you can see, there's the name of the department, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC. Our office, the Immigration Advisors, we specialize in helping students on a number of topics. And you can see, mostly we work with students to help them understand about their study permit, about their entry visa. Some students instead might need what's called an electronic travel authorization instead of an entry visa. A small number of students don't need either of those, but we can help you understand those things better. And then finally, we also work a lot to help students understand about their authorization to work in Canada. And that can be a complex topic, but many students are, of course, interested in that. We do have a webpage. It's one of these tiny URLs. So you can see in the top right corner there, uoft.me/immigration. The real web address is much longer than that, but if you just type in uoft.me/immigration into your web browser, it's going to take you right to the main web page for our office and the type of advice that you can get on these matters. At the bottom of the screen there, you see a couple of notes that are just important to be aware of. First of all, it is important that you understand that in Canada, only lawyers and certified immigration are permitted to provide advice about these matters. As I mentioned before, the people who work in my office are certified immigration consultants. They are professionals. So we have the training, we have the license and the ongoing training and professional development to make sure that we know what we're talking about. Lawyers, of course, are also very highly qualified in these areas. You may find a lot of free advice online, and just understand you get what you pay for, right? If it's free, it's okay to be, wary of that. Our service is available to you at no additional charge. As a U of T student, you can come and get advice. You will never have to pay us any money for that advice. One exception to the things that we can provide advice about is we do not provide advice about permanent residency. So that is something which is not a requirement of being an international student in Canada. And so we just basically don't cover that. It's very, very complex in each case. And so it would take up just way too much of our time. We need to really focus on helping international students to understand about their study permits, entry visas, and working in Canada. So I appreciate your understanding about that. How can you access our support? Well, there's a few different ways that you can get in touch with our advisors and learn and receive advice from us. So let's go left to right on this slide. So in the first box, there's just a brief note there about scheduling an appointment. So you can use our CLNX system, clnx.utoronto.ca. You'd log in using your UTOR ID, and you can go to the appointment section, Center for International Experience, and there you can find whether there are any upcoming appointments that are available to meet with one of our immigration advisors. Those appointments are quite popular, and so they do go quickly. Every couple of weeks, we make new appointments available for the future weeks, but you might find that there are times where there's just no future appointments available, and I do apologize, but there's only so many advisors. And of course, we also want to be doing other things like checking email and doing webinars like the one today that I'm doing right now. So that brings me to the middle column where you see our email address and our phone number. The email is maybe one of the best ways to get in touch with us. So if you just email us there, we should be able to get back to you within about a week. Right now, it's more like 2 weeks, but we are reviewing all the emails as they come in. And if there's anything really super urgent, we try to get to that much more quickly and prioritize that. During the year, I think we should be able to respond to people within a week, or less than that, 2 to 3 days, something like that. So don't hesitate to email us if you have any questions. And then finally, I wanted to make sure you're aware that we do regularly present this information to groups of students. Those are, right now, they're webinars because they're online, just like this one. In the past, and I'm sure in the future, we will do in-person information sessions at our building. But for now, all of our information sessions are definitely online as webinars. And you can go to this webpage, uoft.me/immigration workshops, to find more information about that. You can register those webinars through the CLNX events system. CIE, of course, has an events calendar on CLNX. So here's just a preview of the sessions that we have already scheduled for the fall term. Again, these are things that you can go and sign up for. So you could see we have more immigration orientation sessions, just like this one. We'll be providing those in early September. And so that'll be really good, but mostly covering the content that I'm covering for you here today. The additional sessions that you see listed there, you might already be interested in some of those. Many students are interested in the Working in Canada session. You can see we've already planned to do that 10 times just to make sure that everybody has a chance to attend. We also have others about the co-op work permit, if that fits your situation with your academic program, post-graduation work permit, and of course extensions. And it is very normal that some students will need to apply to extend their study permit and or their entry visa while they're here in Canada. And so we have a special presentation that just helps them to understand about that process. So those are the immigration workshops. And all of that is just helpful information to help you connect with our advising. Next, I'm just going to move on and spend a bit of time talking about the current situation this summer with COVID, the pandemic, and how that has impacted the processing of study permits, and also how it affects the regulations regarding when students can start their studying, maybe most importantly, when students can come to Canada. As I mentioned before, a lot of our new international students are not yet permitted to come to Canada. So I'm going to clarify about that. Hopefully this presentation will help to clarify that for you. So first, let's talk about students who may have applied for their study permit, but maybe you don't have a response yet. I hope everybody here today has applied, at least applied for your study permit. So it's important to understand that Canadian consulates around the world are processing study permit applications. It's not true that they are on hold and that they have stopped that processing. They are definitely processing study permit applications all over the world. Just a few weeks ago, Immigration Canada has introduced a new 2-stage process for reviewing applications. Basically, the first stage is for applications which are incomplete. There may be some additional documents that are still needed, but the student has been unable to secure those documents. Like maybe the student is required to take a medical exam or provide police certificates or their fingerprints, their biometrics. It's possible that because of the pandemic, the student may be unable to provide those documents at this time. We still recommend that students submit that application. The government is receiving incomplete applications. It's just important to include a letter of explanation to explain what are the documents that you're not able to provide yet, and acknowledge, how are you planning to provide those documents as soon as they are available to you. The government will review the incomplete application, and if everything looks good so far with that application, then you'll receive a notice from the government confirming that you have passed stage 1. Stage 1 is not an approval for a study permit. It's not a guarantee that you're going to be approved, but it is an acknowledgement that they've received your incomplete application and everything looks good so far. They're just waiting for you to send the rest of the documents that are required. Stage 2 is actual study permit approval. So that is for applications which are complete and can now move on, and actually a final decision can be made. So if you make it to the end of stage 2, that means the immigration officer has been able to make a final decision, and they have either approved you for the study permit, and then you'll receive a letter of introduction in your online account, or they may have made the decision to deny your study permit. In that case, we strongly recommend that you get in touch with our office, Immigration Advising at CIE, so that we can review your case, review the reasons that were provided for the denial, and give you some advice about how to move forward. So the second bullet point there is just to let you know that Immigration Canada has made it clear that they will inform successful applicants about when it is okay to travel to Canada. So right now, if you are living outside of Canada and outside of the United States, basically any other country in the world outside of those two, if you have approval for a study permit, you are not yet permitted to travel to Canada. So this note is just to say that Immigration Canada will send out a message when the regulations have changed, allowing those students to come to Canada. Students who cannot come to Canada to attend in-person classes right now can certainly start their classes online, and that will have no impact on future applications. For example, in a few years, maybe you'll apply to extend your study permit. That would not be affected by the fact that you started your classes from outside Canada. The same thing with the post-graduation work permit. If you start your classes now, having already applied for a study permit, there won't be an impact on the post-graduation work permit so long as you do eventually come to Canada and complete at least half of your program in person. There's a bit more information about that on the next slide, so I'll come back to that. It's important to many students. Finally, just want students to understand that if you choose to defer your start date, you can use the same study permit approval letter, the same introduction letter that's issued this year for arrival next year. So that's for students who are deferring maybe to start next September. They don't have to cancel their study permit application now and reapply at some later date. They can continue with their current application even though they're not planning to start until next year. Okay, so on a related topic, it's good to just spend a little bit of time talking again about studying online this fall. What does that mean with regard to legal status? The term that Immigration Canada uses is often remote studying or what's called distance learning. Those are all things that kind of refer to the same thing, which is basically taking your courses online, whether you're here in Canada or outside of Canada. Studying online does not require a study permit. All students can start their program online. Students who have a study permit application in process will be able to count the time that they're spending studying online this fall towards the duration of a post-graduation work permit. So there's really two considerations with the post-graduation work permit. The first is, are you eligible for the work permit? And then the second one is, how long would that work permit be for? In other words, what would be the duration of that work permit? So it's two different questions. This is, of course, a work permit which you would apply for after you have completed your studies. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but I want to ease anyone's anxiety about that, okay? So just important to understand, if you have applied for a study permit and you start your online studies from outside Canada, then when it comes time to apply for the postgrad work permit, as long as you're eligible for the work permit, you will be able to count this time period, these fall term studies from outside Canada, towards the duration of that postgrad work permit. This is a special rule that is in place because of the pandemic and because we know that many, many students are not able to come to Canada for the fall term. And so we don't want to disadvantage them when it comes to applying for the work permit. One last note, as I mentioned before, eligibility for the postgrad work permit will not be affected by these online studies as long as the student eventually completes at least 50% of their program's duration in person. Most of you are just starting what will probably be a 4-year program. So you need to complete at least 2 years of that program in person. And you're just in your first year now. So, again, we feel quite confident that you'll be able to meet that particular eligibility requirement. Okay, so moving on, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about the current travel restrictions that are in place regarding entry to Canada. It's very important to understand about these travel restrictions and to understand that some people are exempt from the travel restrictions and are able to come to Canada. Many of our new international students are not able to come to Canada because of these travel restrictions. So it's important to understand what the current travel restrictions are and just be aware that they will change at some point. We just don't know when they're going to change, okay? So under the current travel restrictions, and here we are, August 21st, to travel to and to enter Canada, international students must fulfill all three of these requirements listed here. One, they must meet one of the travel exemptions. I'll cover those in a moment. Two, they must show proof that their travel to Canada is essential. In other words, that it is non-discretionary. Their travel is non-discretionary. I'll go into some detail about that as well. And then the third thing is every traveler to Canada must show a plan for the mandatory 14-day quarantine. I'll cover a bit of information about that. So taking each of those one at a time, let's start with the travel exemptions. So who is exempt from the travel restrictions? Students who have a valid study permit. That is the hard copy piece of paper which was issued to them when they first came to Canada. That's what a valid study permit is. A new student who has applied from outside Canada for a study permit will not have the actual valid study permit. So that's very important to understand. What other types of people are eligible for the travel exemption? So the second bullet point here identifies students who are coming from the United States of America, including non-USA citizens who are coming from the United States, who have an approval letter for a study permit. So that's only people who are traveling into Canada from the USA. If they have an approval letter, this letter of introduction, then they are exempt from the travel restrictions. The third group are students who are coming from any country in the world who have an approval letter which was issued before March 18th. I think that's probably a very small group of people. Most of our students have received their letter of approval after March 18th, and so therefore they would not qualify for that exemption. So that's part number one. Are you exempt from the travel restrictions? But remember, there's two other things that you need to show in order to be able to travel and enter Canada. So the second one is you need to show that your travel is essential, that your travel is non-discretionary. That's your purpose for entering Canada. Both the airline as well as the Canada Border Services Agency will be asking for documents which prove that your reasons for traveling to Canada are non-discretionary. In other words, that you have to be in Canada in order to pursue your studies. What kind of evidence can you show to try to meet this requirement? Well, there's a few different ways that you can try to do that. The strongest evidence includes things like a personalized letter of support from your registrar's office confirming that you are enrolled in in-person courses. That is, courses which require you to be physically present here on campus in Canada. Your registrar's office can provide a letter for you if that's the case in terms of your enrollments. Another possibility would be if the student can get a personalized support letter from their department or their academic supervisor, their professor, confirming that they are required to work in a laboratory or somewhere else on campus as a part of their studies. That is unlikely to be the situation for an undergraduate level student. It might be, but it's unlikely, especially for a first-year undergrad student. Other possibilities are maybe the student is returning to their life in Canada. In other words, they have been already living in Canada, maybe for high school, or maybe this is a student who completed the International Foundations program last year. They were living in Canada. Maybe they left Canada briefly because of COVID, and now they are returning to their previous life in Canada. that would be considered non-discretionary travel as long as they can show evidence that they were previously living in Canada recently. And then finally, some students are able to show evidence that pursuing their studies online is not possible from their home country. For example, due to internet restrictions or bandwidth limitation on their internet access. That kind of thing should be discussed with the registrar's office to make sure, to find out whether the registrar's office can help to write a letter in support of that. Okay, so you can see this gets a bit complex. It's really important to have a plan in place to make sure that you meet these 3 requirements. The third requirement is the mandatory 2-week or 14-day quarantine requirement. U of T has a plan, a program in place to help students fulfill this requirement. So you can apply to participate in this program. It's already started. It started midway through August, and it will continue until, I believe, the 2nd week of September. This program includes transportation from the airport to the quarantine location. It includes a private room with a washroom at either a hotel or a U of T residence, depending on availability. It also includes 3 meals per day delivered right to your door and other support services like a health checkup each day, that sort of thing. The university is paying for the cost of this plan for each of our students so that you can have the plan in place. Once you have signed up for the plan, and you can apply using this website here, starres.utoronto.ca, you can sign up for that plan, and once it's all been confirmed, then you will receive a document from U of T which confirms that you are participating in this plan, and you can show that when you arrive at the border as confirmation that you do have a plan for your 14-day quarantine. Okay, so I also wanted to just spend a little bit of time at the end here just covering what are your responsibilities as a study permit holder. So once you arrive in Canada and you receive your study permit, what are the responsibilities involved there? In the first place, it's important to understand that while you're here in Canada, you must be actively pursuing studies. You must be enrolled, registered at a university or another type of educational institution, and actually actively participating in studies. In terms of U of T, what that means is that you can be either part-time or full-time. A lot of students believe that they're only allowed to be full-time if they have a study permit, but actually both part-time and full-time studies are permitted through the study permit. It is also possible to apply for an authorized leave from your studies if that's needed for things like health reasons or family emergencies. You can still remain in Canada for a few months, up to 150 days as a student, if you do have one of these authorized leaves. It's important not to work in Canada unless you are authorized to do so. There will be information on your study permit. And of course, as you saw, we do have some information sessions to help students understand about working in Canada. As I mentioned, you should read and understand the conditions and remarks that are written on your study permit. There is information on your study permit to help you understand what are the rules. There's also a very helpful website that the Immigration Canada has provided, which reviews what are those rules, but a number of them are written specifically on your study permit, and so you should read and understand those. One of the most common ones is information about whether or not you are permitted to work in Canada. It's written right there on your study permit. Finally, it's really important that you make sure that your legal status is always valid. Do not let your study permit expire. If it's going to expire, you should apply to extend your study permit prior to the expiry date. Don't let that study permit expire, okay? A bit of just a couple more slides here, which include additional advice for international students to help them maintain and observe their responsibilities as a study permit holder. First of all, we always recommend that students make a digital copy of their immigration documents and email those to yourself or maybe a trusted family member or friend. Just in case you lose the original document, you'll have at least a picture of that document in case you absolutely need that. if you should lose your study permit, there is a way for you to apply to get a replacement copy, and you should do that. Don't just rely on having a picture of the original one. Definitely get a new one, but you know, it's helpful just to have that digital copy. Second, remember to renew your study permit before it expires. I mentioned that on the previous slide, but what we're actually recommending that you do is set a reminder in your calendar. So when you get your study permit, one of the first things you can do is pull out your phone and open up your calendar app and put a reminder in there. Just look, you know, what is the expiry date of my study permit? It's written right there on the study permit. Put in a reminder in your calendar on that date, and then also a reminder 2 or 3 months prior to that, so that you know, okay, now is the time to begin my application for extending that study permit. And don't work in Canada without the correct authorization. I mentioned this before. It's really important. That's why I'm repeating myself. Many students do have authorization to work in Canada based simply on their study permit. Others might need a special work permit in order to be able to work in Canada. We provide advice about all of that in our special information session, the webinar called Working in Canada, and you can sign up for that webinar on CLNX. Speaking specifically about working in Canada, it's important to understand that you have to maintain full-time registration continuously if you want to work on or off campus during your degree program. Only full-time registered students are allowed to work on or off campus during the regular academic sessions of their degree program. That's the typical fall-winter sessions. Also, you should maintain full-time registration during every fall-winter session in order to be eligible for the post-graduation work permit after your degree. For both of these cases, working during your degree as well as eligibility for the postgrad work permit, there are 2 exceptions. Those exceptions are that full-time registration is not required during scheduled breaks and during the very last term of studies. A scheduled break is something like the summer term in the Faculty of Arts and Science. There are courses available during the summer term, but students are not expected or required to register during the summer term. That is May, June, July, and August. Students are expected to register during the fall and winter terms and enroll in courses, and therefore the fall and winter, we consider those the regular academic terms. Summer is a scheduled break, and so you don't have to be registered as a full-time student, and you could, even in many situations, work during a scheduled break. Definitely get in touch with our office to find out the specific requirements about that. Same thing's true about working during the very last term of studies, your final 4 months of your entire degree program, that final term. It's okay if you're a part-time student. You could still work during that time period if you're part-time, and you would also still be eligible for the postgrad work permit if you're part-time in that very last term of studies. So my very last piece of advice, and this is the last thing I'm going to mention during this presentation, we recommend that everyone apply for an Ontario government identification card. Another option would be to apply for an Ontario government driver's license. So you would apply for one or the other. Now, you are not a citizen of Canada. You're not a permanent resident of Ontario or Canada, but temporary residents, like students, are eligible for this kind of government identification. So you can apply for that. You would apply through an office called Service Ontario, and you can use that as official government identification while you're here. And that's much better than always carrying around your passport with you wherever you go. Actually, you want to keep your passport and your study permit in a safe location in your apartment or your residence room. Just keep those safe. Don't carry them around with you all the time. But you are going to need some kind of government ID normally. And so, you know, it's a good idea to apply for this Ontario government identification. So that's the end of what I wanted to present to you today. I hope you'll feel confident communicating with our office in the future and connecting with our other information sessions. That's all that I wanted to cover today. We've got a few more minutes left. So I'm just gonna go and take a look and see whether you all have any questions. You can add those to the chat. And I know hopefully Tyler and Hannah will rejoin me here in case there are any other questions in the chat that they can help me to answer. I see we still have almost 30 people in the room right now. So please let us know if you have any questions on any of these topics, and we'll be happy to help you. I remember when Hannah invited questions, everyone was a little bit shy at first. Okay, great. Just Tyler also encouraging people to reach out. Okay, so we've got a question here from Maya. Do you have a personal opinion or guess when the travel restrictions for non-US international students will be lifted? Maya, I absolutely welcome that question, but unfortunately, I really don't have any idea when those travel restrictions are going to change. I do believe that the Canadian government is relying a lot on the professional healthcare providers. So we definitely have to look at what is the epidemiology, right? Maybe some of you are going to study epidemiology. I think there's a lot of newfound interest in that science. It's basically the study of disease, right? And everyone in the world is dealing with this right now. I really strongly believe that the Canadian government is making decisions about the border closure based on the current healthcare situation. And so we just have to rely on them to be continuing to make those decisions. Here we are, August 21st. I think it's pretty clear that the travel restrictions are not going to change between now and the start of classes in early September. That's just a few weeks away. So I think a lot of us have really turned our attention to focusing on helping international students to arrive for January, so that most are going to be starting online for the fall term and focusing on their studies, being really successful in those fall term studies. And then we're all hopeful, fingers crossed, that the travel restrictions can be changed at some point in the months ahead. But again, I'm sorry, just have no way of knowing when that's going to happen. Okay, another question from Cusio. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If I have a driver's license in my country of residence that is also valid in Canada, do I still need the driver's license issued from Service Ontario? Hannah might actually know the answer to that question more than I would. I certainly believe that for the first few months, it's possible to drive around in Canada with a driver's license from another country. Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that the government of Ontario prefers that if someone's going to be living in Ontario for more than 6 months, it's really important to actually get an Ontario driver's license. Is that right?
Yes, and I would have to look it up, but there also is a program where you could, like, certain countries have an agreement where a license from one country could then be exchanged. So like, oh, you don't have to redo the test, like you don't have to go to driving school and do everything to have to get a brand new driver's license. And this is information that is there for newcomers to Canada. So I often get it from those websites that explain how do you exchange a driver's license that was valid so that you can then have an Ontario one without having to go through all those steps. So I know we're almost ending, but I can try to quickly look for that link and share it in the chat.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much, Hannah. That's really helpful. Kanishka has asked a related question. Can I apply for the Ontario government ID while I'm overseas? I don't believe that's possible. I think you actually have to establish your temporary residency in Ontario before you can apply for an Ontario government ID. So you would actually have to arrive first. I see Akshat has asked a question about the study permit. Does the study permit have any specific entry date up to which the student must enter Canada, or can I enter whenever I'm able to, maybe even after a year? So that's a good question. When a student is approved from outside Canada, when they are approved for a study permit, they receive an approval letter. It's called the Port of Entry Letter of Introduction. And so I mentioned that before. This letter of introduction does have an expiry date on it, and the student has to come to Canada before that expiry date. But you know what? That expiry date is usually the end of the person's proposed academic program. So for many of you, that could be 4 years from now. So you have a lot of time to be able to come to Canada. in order to make use of that letter of introduction. So hopefully that's a helpful answer to your question. When you arrive in Canada at the border, you must show that letter to the border officer, and they will direct you to a special office where they're actually going to print your study permit. And that's the permit that you're going to have, which allows you to study in Canada. So you'll get the study permit the moment that you arrive at the border, and that study permit will be issued on the date that you arrived and will have, of course, its own expiry date as well. So hopefully that's a helpful answer. For students who have received the letter of introduction and yet they're going to defer their start date to the following year, we always recommend that they get an updated admission letter for when they arrive in Canada, so they can show that it was approved for them to come later. Maya has asked, I am not a US citizen and am not living in the United States. However, if I am able to enter the US, can I then travel to Canada once I receive my study permit approval letter? That's a really good question, Maya. A lot of people have asked that question. We're not quite sure what the answer is. One thing that we are pretty confident about is if someone is planning to transit through the United States, that is, maybe like fly through Los Angeles or New York and then continue on to Canada on that same trip, then that's not considered entering from the United States. That's not permitted, transiting. So I think the expectation is that the person would be in the United States for a period of time, like would have fully entered the United States and been there for, I don't know, at least several days or maybe even weeks, and then attempted to travel just from the USA into Canada. That's our understanding of the situation. I definitely would not try transiting through the United States. Hopefully that's a helpful answer to that question. I see that Hannah has shared the driver's license, exchanging the driver's license URL. Thanks very much, Hannah, for that. Do we have any other questions regarding health insurance or study permits or really any other questions you have about being an international student?
I just wanted to take this time to thank Hannah and Mark again for joining us this morning. Just speaking from my own personal experience as an international student, I had UHIP during my entire degree, and the CIE helped me maintain my study permit, and then I got my postgrad permit, and now I'm a permanent resident. Woohoo! I'm a success story. So the support of the CIE was instrumental in all of that, and I hope that you don't just enjoy the session today, but you keep accessing their services down the road as well. Thank you again for coming, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us, Tyler.